So we were working on a project out in rural Georgia, and somebody said, "Hey, Nick and Kim, did you guys hear about the big controversial ICE detention centers and data centers going in the Atlanta suburbs?" We were like, "No." They're like, "It's kind of like Alligator Alcatraz, but in Georgia. And a lot of people out here aren't very happy about it." So we went there. We talked to a farmer. Here's what he had to say.
This was a distribution center that they built to bring in some business. Well, nobody ended up using it, so the government saw that it was unused and decided to purchase it and turn this into an ICE detention facility with 10,000 possible detainees. Well, you can imagine that the community did not want this here. The roads, the water, the law enforcement, all of it, not going to happen. They've protested it. They've tried to fight back against it here in rural Georgia. And what's the most interesting about it is the conservatives in town who agree with the policies of removing immigrants from the country, illegals, are on the same page with the Democrats who hate ICE. They all agree, we don't want this here, and they've actually come together and built a common alliance against this. The most prominent guy, his name's John Miller. He's got a farm right on the other side of those trees. We're gonna go talk to him. He's been the biggest person that's against it because it's right against his property. All right, folks, since Kim and I are such go-getters, we stopped by John Miller's property here. John is the one of the most contentious voices against the ICE detention center, which is proposed over those tree lines over there. This is John's property here. He has a beautiful farm, 50-acre farm out here with horses. It's just absolutely beautiful. All right, John, talk to me about what's going on over here. What's the latest? How did this even happen? You're frustrated. A lot of the folks around here are frustrated.
Well, it caught a lot of us by surprise, actually all of us by surprise, when the day before Christmas, we saw the Washington Post article that was posted that listed Social Circle as one of the locations for the new ICE warehouse detention center plan. So we were very much caught off guard. I actually had one of our city council folks send me a copy of the article and asking for my thoughts on it, and I thought he was joking. I didn't think in any real world that it was a serious thing. So we were very, very much caught off guard. Very shortly after that, we started calling anybody and everybody that could possibly know anything about it, from our local officials who hadn't heard anything about it, to our state representatives who hadn't heard anything about it, to even our congressional and Senate representatives who hadn't heard anything about it either. And that struck us as very odd, because you would think any person, individual, business, the first thing they would do when they were going to do a project of this size and scale is interact with the local municipality to talk about what their plans are and figure out how this facility was going to work within the local community. So it was very shocking.
Hit the highlights on what they're proposing to do and how that would work in this part of your community.
Well, the building was initially built as a distribution warehouse. I think the initial idea was for it to support either Rivian's, the new Rivian plant that's 3/4 of a mile down the road, and or a big distribution warehouse like Amazon or something like that. But it's actually sat empty for nearly 2 years. And it was pretty controversial when it was approved to begin with, because a lot of us, not me personally, a lot of local residents said, I'm not sure the wisdom of building a big facility like this with no stated end user. I don't know that we could have ever imagined that this is what we would get, but the intention is to build a big detention center that'll house between 8,000 to 10,000 residents. It has multiple different pods with recreational areas. There's a full magistrate court inside, attorney rooms, a gun range, medical facility. Everything is being shown on this particular plan. But yeah, the intent is to house 5,000 to 10,000 immigrants that will be shuttled into this building from smaller satellite locations, is what we're being told.
And the infrastructure, the roads, the water, there's no way that the local law enforcement, how are we going to support this?
Well, that is been the unifying nugget, you might say, that has crossed every ideological line here, because it's still rural Georgia, very conservative area, a lot of support for the overall immigration policy, but even folks who support the policy can't get past the logical, real, concrete facts as they lay on the ground. Some of those facts being that we produce as a small town 660,000 gallons of water a day. This facility, they are telling us, would use up to 1 million gallons of water a day. So I'm not a mathematician, but that math ain't mathin'. So when we ask those questions, rather than get real answers for it, they say, well, don't worry about it. We'll drill wells. Okay, well, that's fine. We're standing on my farm right now, which is literally across the street from it, and I have a well. Imagine what happens when you take 1 million gallons of water a day out of the ground. What happens to the water table for all the other wells in the surrounding area? So we bring up that, and then they go, well, we'll just truck it in. Okay, well, let's truck it in. 1 million gallons a day. Water truck holds about 6,000 gallons. That's 170-ish so water trucks traversing through our 4-way stop. In addition to the 5,000 daily commutes for the employees that will work at the facility. I don't know if you showed a shot of it, but you may want to, but it is literally a 4-way stop where one of the intersections, there's a railroad crossing that is very active. And so many times during the day, you can't traverse the 4-way stop until the trains finish going through. And now we're going to add 5,000 additional commutes through that road. So these are some of the things that we keep pointing out to DHS. Now, prior to the change in leadership, the answers that we got were, well, then you must just, if you're not supporting us and not getting out of our way, then you must support criminal illegals. Well, I can't even get to that question until we answer the water and infrastructure issues. So that's been the unifying nugget of the entire experience.
It's like the one thing that Democrats and conservatives in this area have agreed on in a long time.
It is, maybe for different reasons, but like I said, it's nice to actually agree on something, but you can't get past the facts. Facts don't have feelings. I've always liked that phrase, and that's the truth. And when we have our discussions, even when they are ideological, we try to base them around facts. And we've had a lot of very constructive conversations ideologically since all of this has happened as well, and we've been able to find some common ground there too. So that's been, if there is a silver lining, which I always try to look for, that's been one.
And you told me, you're like, how in the heck did our little town, out of all the thousands of communities this could have been in, how did that dart just land right over there? Like, bad luck? I don't know.
I don't know what kind of luck you call it. It's pretty amazing. Contrary to what was the initial belief, no one in the local community or local politics pocketed any money outside of the P&K group that actually sold the building, which is kind of frustrating that they paid $128 million for the building when it was recently appraised for in the $54 million range. So one thing you can get conservatives on board with is common sense and fiscal responsibility. You can usually lay that out fairly easily, and they're like, oh, well, yeah, that makes sense. So that's been a real unifying topic of conversation as well.
How disappointed, how crushed are you going to be if it's on hold right now, they're reviewing it again, if they go, no, we're going for it?
Well, what we've been told is that they're reviewing it, and that if they do decide to go forward with it, that they will now engage with the local municipality to address some of these issues. We have obviously been in very close contact with all of our congressional and Senate offices. Both Raphael Warnock and Mike Collins' office have put in requisition requests to address some of the infrastructure issues, which we very much appreciate. Those typically take a long time to actually come to fruition. So we're hoping and encouraging that if those things are going to come through, that they are done so with a sense of urgency. If they do decide to move forward, because again, you can't get past the facts of what we're dealing with, and it's going to take a pretty Herculean effort to overcome those issues in order to get it off the ground. So my understanding is that this was originally not a primary site. This was an alternate site that they chose to move forward on. So we're hoping that they will decide to move somewhere else.
Re-alternate.
Yeah, that they'll choose another location. But it still creates other problems now that they've actually closed on the property. Is that, with the government owning it, that it gets taken off of our tax rolls. So our already small budget, I mean, a town of 5,000 people, I mean, our city budget is like $28 million total, and this will be a $1.2 million hit off of that. So that's a pretty significant hit that is going to have to be made up by us as residents, because there just isn't a lot to cut at this point.
How long have you had this farm?
We've owned this farm for 5 years.
Okay.
We've been residents of Social Circle since, for 21 years. We live here, we work here, we own a business here, we have the farm here. We have 7 children here, 3 grandkids that are all here. I mean, we're as invested in Social Circle and its future as you can possibly be.
Did you ever anticipate that this whole area would be storage and distribution centers and maybe ICE facilities and whatever else is maybe coming up?
No, ironically, I'm a member of the One Circle Community Coalition, which we actually formed before all of this started, in primarily response to all the data center applications that were coming here. I mean, at one point we had 11 data center applications, and although I can understand and empathize with our city's leaders' desire for the income that perhaps can come from data centers, my biggest issue, especially in a small town like this, is that we're going to build our budgets on those data centers for the next 50 to 100 years. And technology, as fast as it moves, I mean, if you can think, you're filming this interview on an iPhone. How many years ago was it that an iPhone didn't exist? I see a very short window of time where these data centers buildings are going to be obsolete and not needed. And we've built our city budget, and so we're doing a Midwestern style, industrial death all over again. I mean, in the 1940s or 50s, we had textile mill here in town. In fact, the remnants of it are still in downtown. We're still trying to figure out what to do with that building. And when it went down, this town went through a Great Depression. And I see that on steroids if we put all of our eggs in the data center basket. So our group is continuing to push our municipal leaders that we need to diversify our tax base, not put all our eggs in the data center basket, which unfortunately evidence kind of leads to that's what we're doing.
Why would they pick out here for a data center? Do they just see a rural area with maybe a good water table and think like, oh, find somebody that'll sell cheap and do it? Is that how it works?
That's been the modus of operandus all over the country, whether it's Texas, Virginia, Georgia, is that they're finding rural areas that are typically starving for cash, and that are very quick, easy targets, don't have a lot of regulation in those areas where they can get in quick, get it approved before the local municipalities really know what's happening. And that's what we've been really struggling to fight against, and say, look, like right now in the Georgia legislature, I think there's 11 bills going through the House that have to do with data centers. And we've been saying, look, maybe the prudent thing to do is to let that play out and see what the rules of the road are going to be before we just approve all of them, before even knowing what these things are how they're going to affect, whether it's sound, whether it's power, whether it's our utility bills, whether it's water. All of those things are finite resources. Whether they belong to us or not, they're still finite resources. So, me personally, I think Elon and even China's talking about putting data centers in the ocean, and of course that's going to raise the water temperature, of the world, and that's going to melt the polar ice caps. Elon's talking about putting them in space, which might make a lot of sense. The space espionage ought to be pretty interesting. There'll be a lot of James Bond films probably based on stealing data centers from space. But I think that there should be some other options that we look at rather than just rural communities.
Thanks, Sean.
All right, man.